Good evening, America, and happy Memorial Day to every veteran, every active duty service member, every military family watching tonight on a day when this country pauses to honor the men and women who gave everything in service to this nation. The war with Iran is still raging. The deal that was supposed to be announced is still not signed. And the situation in the Middle East is moving in ways that demand your full attention tonight. Stay with me, because in the last 48 hours, this story has taken a dramatic and deeply revealing turn. Let us go back to Saturday. Just 2 days ago, President Trump stood before the world on social media and declared that a peace deal with Iran was, in his own words, largely negotiated. He said the final details would be announced shortly. He said he had spoken with the leaders of 8 major nations. He said a memorandum of understanding pertaining to peace was almost done. Markets responded. Oil prices moved. The world exhaled just a little bit. It felt like the end of a 3-month war might finally be within reach. Then Sunday happened. Within 24 hours of that announcement, President Trump was back on Truth Social with an entirely different message. He told his negotiating team publicly and explicitly not to rush into a deal with Iran. He said time is on our side. He said the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz would remain in full force and effect until an agreement is reached, certified, and signed. He said both sides must take their time and get it right. And in a sharp swipe at Republicans and former officials who had been publicly criticizing the terms of the brewing deal, Trump called his critics losers, saying they have no idea what they are talking about. So in the space of just 24 hours, the world went from a deal being largely negotiated and about to be announced to no rush, time is on our side, and the blockade stays. That whiplash is not just a communications problem. It tells you something important about the state of these negotiations, about the internal pressures Trump is facing from within his own party, and about how far apart the United States and Iran still actually are on the details that matter most. Secretary of State Marco Rubio went on record today and confirmed what the Sunday reversal already signaled. He said the Iran peace deal is still a work in progress, and it takes a little while to hear back. A senior U.S. official told reporters it could take a few more days before even the memorandum of understanding is finalized. And here is the phrase that should tell you everything about the gap that still exists. A senior administration official confirmed that the framework agreement, if and when it is signed, will give the parties 60 days to reach final deal points. 60 more days of negotiation after the memo is signed. That is not a peace agreement. That is a framework for the possibility of eventually beginning to negotiate a peace agreement. The war is not ending this week. Now let us break down exactly what is in this proposed memorandum, because the details reveal why this deal is so controversial and why it is facing such fierce resistance from so many different directions simultaneously. According to reporting from multiple senior officials with direct knowledge of the negotiations, here is what the deal currently on the table actually contains. The Strait of Hormuz would be reopened to international commercial shipping. The American naval blockade of Iranian ports would be lifted proportionately as the strait opens. Some of Iran's frozen assets held in foreign banks would be unfrozen. Iran would agree to dispose of its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, the more than 400 kilograms, roughly 900 pounds of material, much of which is believed to have been buried underground after U.S. strikes. And in exchange for all of that, there would be further negotiations within 60 days on Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missile capabilities, and the longer-term framework for peace. Here is what is not in the deal. There is no requirement for Iran to stop enriching uranium going forward. There is no moratorium on enrichment at all. There is no mention of Iran's massive supply of conventional ballistic missiles. There is no requirement for Iran to end its support for Hezbollah, the Houthis, or other regional proxy groups. And the IAEA, the International Nuclear Watchdog, still does not have a clear path to getting inspectors back inside Iran to verify any of this. Now, you understand exactly why people on both sides of this negotiation are furious. From the American right, the criticism is coming loudest and fastest. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, one of the architects of the maximum pressure campaign against Iran during Trump's first term, posted on social media that the deal being floated would, and I am using his words here, pay the IRGC to build a weapons of mass destruction program and terrorize the world. He said the approach is not remotely America first. He demanded that the United States simply open the strait by force, deny Iran access to money, and continue taking out Iranian military capability. Senator Roger Wicker, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, has continued calling the prospective deal a disaster. Senator Lindsey Graham, whose voice carries enormous weight in Republican circles on military matters, is still publicly questioning why this war was fought at all if this is the deal America is prepared to accept. And then there is Mike Pompeo's central accusation, which deserves more attention than it has received. He is saying that unfreezing Iranian assets and allowing any ongoing enrichment capability amounts to funding the very program the war was supposed to destroy. That is not a fringe view. That is the position of one of the most powerful foreign policy voices in the Republican establishment. A man who served as CIA director and Secretary of State and who knows Iran's nuclear file as well as anyone alive. From the Iranian side, the complaints are equally sharp, just in the opposite direction. Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency, which is linked directly to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, said on Sunday that differences over one or two clauses of the possible memorandum of understanding still persist. Those one or two clauses are apparently enough to prevent the deal from being signed. Iran's foreign ministry continued to insist that sanctions must be lifted and frozen assets must be released as part of any agreement. Tehran has made clear that it will not separate sanctions relief from the signing of any memorandum. And Iran's state-affiliated Fars news agency flatly disputed Trump's characterization of the deal, reporting that according to the latest version of the text exchanged between the two sides, the Strait of Hormuz will remain under Iranian management and control. Trump says the strait will be free and open. Iran says it will remain under Iranian authority. That is not a minor disagreement about language. That is a fundamental contradiction at the very heart of the deal. Here is how a senior U.S. official described the mechanism being proposed for the Strait of Hormuz, and pay close attention to this because it is one of the most revealing statements to come out of these negotiations. The official said, if Iran does not perform, they do not get anything. No dust, no dollars. As the strait opens, the blockade loosens proportionately. The official called it trust, but verify on steroids. What that means in plain English is that the reopening of the strait and the lifting of the blockade will happen in stages, with each step by Iran triggering a corresponding step by the United States. In theory, that prevents Iran from taking the money and then failing to deliver on the strait. In practice, it means a prolonged, complex, phase-by-phase implementation process with enormous potential for disputes, accusations of non-compliance, and breakdowns at every single stage. We have already seen exactly how that plays out. After the initial 2-week ceasefire was agreed in April, Iran began charging fees to ships transiting the strait. Trump accused Iran of violating the spirit of the agreement. Iranian officials denied it. The IRGC tightened its grip on the waterway during what was supposed to be a de-escalation period. That is the pattern. That is the history. And that history is one of the primary reasons why so many people inside Washington are skeptical that any deal without airtight, immediately verifiable enforcement mechanisms is worth signing. Now, let us talk about what is happening on the ground today, because the diplomatic drama in Washington and Tehran is only one part of the story, and the human toll of this war is continuing every single hour that negotiations drag on. In Lebanon, the situation remains catastrophic. More than 3,100 people have been killed in Israeli attacks since March 2nd. More than 9,400 wounded. Over 1 million people displaced from their homes. 116 medical workers killed in Israeli strikes, according to the World Health Organization. And the Lebanon ceasefire, brokered by the United States in mid-April, is still being violated almost daily by both Israel and Hezbollah, with each side blaming the other for each new escalation. Iran's foreign minister has written to Hezbollah's leadership explicitly stating that Tehran will not abandon its allies in Lebanon regardless of what any peace deal with the United States says. That letter is not a footnote. It is a warning that even if the U.S. and Iran sign a memorandum, the Lebanon war does not automatically stop. Meanwhile, today is Memorial Day weekend in the United States. And while American families are gathering for barbecues and remembering fallen soldiers, they are also paying more at the gas pump than they have in years. The Strait of Hormuz disruption has driven fuel prices significantly higher. The ripple effects of the dual blockade have pushed inflation to its highest level in years. The economic pain of this war is not abstract. It is landing on American families right now, today, on a holiday weekend, every time someone fills up a tank or pays a grocery bill. That is the hidden cost of a war that is not yet over and a deal that is not yet signed. On the question of Iran's enriched uranium, something that deserves its own focused attention tonight, the situation is genuinely alarming. Iran is believed to hold more than 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, much of it buried underground after American strikes last year. Even if Iran agrees to dispose of this material as part of a deal, the questions of how, where, under whose supervision, and verified by whom are enormous and unresolved. The New York Times has reported that it remains unclear how Iran would actually dispose of its highly enriched uranium, and that a final approval by the leaders of both countries could still take days. Trump has insisted repeatedly that Iran will have to relinquish this material one way or another. But the initial memorandum is not expected to cover enrichment in any detail, leaving the central nuclear question to be resolved in those 60 days of follow-on negotiations that may or may not ever produce an agreement. And here is the context that America needs to understand about those 60 days. Trump has said explicitly that this deal will be the exact opposite of the Obama-era nuclear deal, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that was signed in 2015 and that Trump himself withdrew from in 2018. He says his deal will be fundamentally different and far stronger. But critics from both parties are already pointing out that the structure being described, a memorandum now, detailed nuclear negotiations later, time-phased implementation, proportional relief, is structurally quite similar to the approach the Obama administration used. The comparison is not going unnoticed, and it is one of the reasons Trump's team has been so insistent on language emphasizing how different this will be, even as the actual architecture of the deal raises familiar questions. Let us also talk about something happening right now at the Strait of Hormuz itself that most of the coverage has not adequately explained. As of this weekend, approximately 240 ships are waiting for Iran's permission to pass through the strait, according to Iran's Fars news agency. 240 ships sitting idle, loaded with cargo, burning fuel, costing their owners millions of dollars per day, waiting for a war to end so they can move. And in the past 24 hours, only about 33 ships have transited the strait with Iranian permission. That is a trickle compared to the normal volume that moved through this waterway before the war. The strait is not open. It is barely cracked. And the global economy is feeling every single day that it remains that way. Here is where the situation stands tonight as you watch this video. Trump said the deal was largely negotiated on Saturday. Trump said do not rush on Sunday. Rubio said it is still a work in progress on Monday. Iran says one or two clauses are still blocking agreement. Iran says the strait will remain under its management regardless. Iran is demanding simultaneous sanctions relief that Trump is not prepared to give. The blockade remains in full force. 240 ships are waiting at the strait. The Lebanon war continues despite a ceasefire on paper. And the nuclear question, the central reason this war was fought, is not going to be resolved in the memorandum. It will be left for 60 days of further talks that have not yet begun. This is the reality of where the Iran war stands on Memorial Day 2026. The fighting has stopped, mostly. The dying has slowed, but not stopped. The economic damage is ongoing. The diplomatic resolution is being described simultaneously as almost done and still a work in progress. And the fundamental questions that drove the United States to war in the first place remain unanswered and unresolved. America, I want to ask you something that goes to the very heart of what this Memorial Day means. The men and women we honor today gave their lives for this country. And now American military power is deployed in a war that, if the current deal framework holds, will end without Iran giving up its right to enrich uranium, without Iran dismantling its missile program, and without Iran ending its support for Hezbollah and other proxies across the region. On this Memorial Day, with that reality in front of us, do you believe that the sacrifice of American military power in this war and the ongoing economic pain that every American family is feeling at the gas pump and the grocery store has been worth it based on what we know about the deal that is being put together right now? Or do you believe America needs to hold out for a deal that actually addresses every issue this war was supposed to solve before a single sanction is lifted or a single dollar of frozen assets is returned to Tehran? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to read every single one. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now and turn on notifications, because this story is changing by the hour, and we will be here every single day breaking it down for you.